Hey, good morning. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's case. The date is June 20th, 2024. This is case DCI 2023-00031. It is an amendment to the Gulf Coast Town Center MPD. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under the oath. Must be taken under oath. So if you intend to speak today, if you could please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. And that's okay. I think everyone in the room is familiar with our process, so I will forego those instructions and we can begin with the applicant whenever you're ready.
Dirk, do you have anything beforehand? Okay. No, we're just go for it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Brad Wester, driver McAfee, Hawthorne, and Debanow, 1 Independent Drive, Suite 1200, Jacksonville, Florida, 32202. I am the agent applicant representing Costco, and with me today is John Alvarado and Edward McDonald. John is with Costco, and Eddie is our civil engineer. So these will be folks that are available for any questions and answers as they come up. I have a short presentation, and then I have the exhibits to hand forward that kind of match the presentation format. So without further ado, I'll just go through this. This is an amendment to the Gulf Coast Town Center MPD with 2 deviations to allow a member-based, members-only gas facility relocation to an adjacent out parcel as an ancillary automobile service station, in quotes, with up to 30 pumps. The new facility will allow Costco to meet demand and provide a modernization of infrastructure and improved vehicle circulation. The existing facility will be removed and converted to the surface parking.
Read just a little slower.
I am very sorry about that. I forgot. The existing facility will be removed and converted to surface parking, and that's at the existing Costco wholesale store. There is no convenience store or C-store or auto repair and service with this request. Deviation number 1. This is a relief from section 10-285 for reduced intersection separation distances from Gulf Center Drive, which would be 72 feet from that arc radii at that intersection, and then the Taco Bell parcel access point, which is about 113 feet from the nearest access point to that parcel. This allows a dedicated access for the Costco members, gas supply vendors, employees, and emergency vehicles. 2 secondary interconnection points will remain to and from the Taco Bell parcel. Per code section 10-104 sub B, the deviation justification is based on sound engineering practices depicted on the latest site plan, and that latest site plan was included with these documents, and it'll be also part of this PowerPoint exhibit. The request is a replacement use that has existed at the current Costco site. The request does not duplicate existing facilities, essentially replaces it. The request is not inconsistent with any policy directive of the County Commission or Lee Plan, and the request does not impact utilities' level of service. Deviation number 2. This is really the backbone of the modification to the zoning in Gulf Coast Town Center, which deals with the relocation of the gas pumps, but we've included it as a deviation. It's a relief from a...
But is staff going to address this later because it was not included as a deviation? And my understanding was that this action would supersede the ADD from 2006. Well, it's already been superseded from the 2020. Yes. Okay, go forward.
It's probably a technicality in the descriptions, yes. But it is included on that deviation list that we've included with the reports. But this is relief from the existing ADD 2006-0118, which currently allows 16 gas pumps as an ancillary use to the Costco Wholesale Club. The proposed auto service station relocation includes 24 pumps for the immediate phase, with an additional 6 pumps to be designed, permitted, and built as an expansion at a time to be determined in the future based on demand. The site plan notes the proposed additional 6 pump and infrastructure. This will allow Costco to maintain the level of service standard customary to the members based on demand and advances in fueling technology. This exhibit shows an aerial depiction of the properties. So you see here the existing Costco gas facility, and that is ancillary to the main wholesale club in the picture. One of the rules is, in order to maintain it being an ancillary use, it can't be more than 25 feet away. So we are separated by a little more than 25 feet away of this Gulf Center Drive to this out parcel here. And this is where the proposed relocated gas facility is to be sited. This existing gas station at Costco will be demoed, and it will become surface parking.
Okay, wait, so to clarify that point, do you meet the 25 feet separation then, or do you need a deviation from that as well? That becomes a use deviation though, which we couldn't grant, so.
Just to jump in for clarification, the applicant was seeking to keep it as an ancillary use, but there's a on the same premises definition of the no longer meeting. So this is now technically a standalone use, even though it's functioning as an ancillary use to the Costco. We reviewed this as a standalone gas station, or sorry, automotive service station, and not as just an accessory to the.
And in this case, the automobile service station, that is the definition we're going with, albeit it is a little out of context because this is not going to include a convenience store or any service to the vehicles. It is strictly what is existing now, which is a member-based gas facility only, with a canopy, increased fuel pump capacity, and one employee with one station. This is the main view from Gulf Center Drive, and it shows the existing access point. This is a concrete driveway that was paved for kind of construction staging, and it has remained. So our access point is actually further from the intersection, so we will be modifying and demoing that existing access point. But this shows all of the landscaping all the way around the entire perimeter of the property, which is indicative of the Gulf Coast Town Center regulations. And then you see here, this is the Taco Bell property. Folks have essentially been driving customary practice to kind of go out of Taco Bell because they've kind of have kind of ramps essentially there. And that will remain as one of the interconnection points once we build the infrastructure. This is the Gulf Coast Town Center site plan, and it shows where the existing gas facility is and the proposed relocated gas facility. This is the PUD exhibit, so it shows in context with the out parcel redevelopment, the new staging of the vehicles and the canopy, the entry point that we talked about, and then the need for a separation distance from the intersection there, and as well as the separation distance from the Taco Bell parcel. But as you see, the interconnection points will remain into Taco Bell, and then there will be dedicated circulation internally to this for the vehicles. The next slide shows a closer up image of that with the site data. And this was all supplied, but I wanted to kind of provide something that was zoomed in so we could see it if we need to go back to it for discussion purposes. But you see the main entry point here. This is one of the deviations we need, which is a separation distance from the intersection there and a separation distance from the Taco Bell parcel. But the two interconnection points will remain. They've already been programmed, and you see the circulation. This is our landscape plan. So what we're doing is supplementing the existing landscaping that's around the perimeter that was installed with the development of Gulf Coast Town Center. It's very mature, very robust. We're going to be adding to that on the property, as you see, and it's in various areas throughout the property where we've added landscaping per the landscape code and plan, and this has been deemed sufficient by staff. And then there is the elevation imagery of the canopy itself. One thing to note about this facility, again, and I'll reiterate, there is no convenience store with this. There is no automobile service abilities for gas and oil and tire change. It is strictly a fueling facility, and it is tied to the hours of operation of the existing Costco wholesale store. So it won't operate as a satellite. It will remain as an ancillary use to the primary use, which is Costco wholesale. And with that, thank you very much. And me and my team are available to answer any questions.
So can you go back to the site plan for a moment for the actual site, yes. So the future expansion, because you're requesting 30 fueling stations.
That's correct.
Fueling positions, which currently is 8 pumps with 16 fueling positions. That's one of my questions, because the TIS mentioned that you've currently got 8 pumps, 16 fueling positions. You're changing to 15 pumps, 30 fueling positions, but the request is written as you're increasing from 8 to 30.
30 overall is the
So
request.
30 overall.
Yes, ma'am. And here it is in graphic form. So this is the 24 pumps that will be built immediately under the canopy. And then here is the addition of the pumps in the future. And so we've already designed this to allow that expansion as needed per code. And it meets all the circulation requirements, but the immediate need is 24, but in the future, we have the ability to come in and apply for site and engineering plan approval per this as a future phase expansion per demand. So it'd be an additional, there's 24 now, it'd be an additional 6 in the future, determined by demand.
Okay, so those would not be constructed, but you would have whatever infrastructure in
That's-
place to accommodate
This
that.
would be a grassed landscape island right here until the time where there is a need for the expansion into that for additional fueling.
Thank you for that, because where future expansion was written, I thought they were going to be going that way, which would of course affect
No,
us.
it's going to run this length of this canopy here and it'll extend out. And we've done a lot of the stacking and queuing and orientation and circulation. And the betterment plan of this is we allow the resupply truck to come in and stage and refuel there, and then pull back out and then sweep around. But all of this is a betterment from the existing facility that's there now that is outdated, obviously. But this provides a lot more engineering with the stacking and queuing for the internal circulation compared to what exists today on the current site.
And the circulation, it seems with the arrows that you have indicated, they would have opportunity to ingress or egress along the southern position, but then they have to queue and exit
That's correct.
in a westerly direction.
Yes.
southern.
And we will always have the ability for folks, if they pull in, they can drive all the way around this property. But the importance of having our dedicated access, which is really the crux of requiring a deviation, is the fact that we will have a fueling truck coming in here for a vendor for resupply, emergency services, and it just helps with the member-based experience that are customary to Costco wholesale, as opposed to going through the Taco Bell parcel, then coming onto this property. And this is really the only place to put it. We've worked with traffic engineering on this. And so that deviation is a request for 72 feet from this arc radius here to the sweep in the curvature of the entry point, and then 113 feet from this back to the existing access point at Taco Bell. But these will be maintained open. So if somebody from Taco Bell pulls in here, obviously they're a customer, they can use this facility and then go out. Or if they pull out and they realize they shouldn't be here, there still is a way for them to get all the way around the property, which is the customary practice for the latest fueling designs for Costco.
And then the way that the condition is written, or the use rather, in condition 2 for the automobile service station, you're limited to 1. So is there some timing component to ensure that they're not both operating at the same time as you close the existing facility and move to this one?
That's a great point. We don't intend to operate both, but I will let John Alvarado with Costco speak. You can come up to the microphone.
Hey, how are you? By the record, John Alvarado with Costco Wholesale. So we've done this in different locations. Actually, the three of us work on another one in Altamonte Springs. And normally what we do is we're going to be operating the existing one until the other one is completely ready to function. And then we shut down one, open the other one. So there won't be an overlap of having two fuel facilities at the same time. I want to clarify, depend on the time of the year. If, for example, we finish building it closer to the holidays, right? We're gonna use the new one, close the other one, but we won't demolish it at that point because it's our busiest, time of the year. And then we don't want to put our employees like with the stress they have to deal with construction when dealing with the holidays. But that may happen, right? But it will be completely blocked off, so no use.
What would be otherwise the expected time between demolition of the old facility to ensure that there's no? The issue also is like people are going to be used to going to the old. There's going to be some confusion, I would imagine, at some point while the one's under construction, especially once it looks finished, and then the old one. I want to be sure that we're whatever signage or whatever you're doing. If we need conditions for that here to ensure that that's done, or if you need to demolish within a certain period. I don't know if that's been discussed.
Okay, that more like the construction scheduling and depend. We have a blackout period, we call it, from November 1st to January 1st. So in that period of time, we try not to do any work on our properties. Again, that's going to be blocked out, basically fenced out, as soon as the other is ready. So in the case, right, that we get to the holidays and we cannot demolish that because of that period of time, that's gonna be blocked off, sign that this is not, and normally, our members, they knew pretty quickly, like where to go, because they normally go to the warehouse, they know where everything is, and then also we advertise inside the warehouse for members, this is coming, this is gonna locate in this side, so once you go back, you know where to go. Thank you.
And if I may just follow up, this is this is Brad Wester. A good example of this is the old fueling facility on the property, and you can see what it's doing is encroaching on the existing surface parking areas. These are all the cars that are stacking and queuing now currently. So this is a Google image, probably circa 2023, late 2023. But you can see all of the cars here kind of just stacking kind of into their own and through the different parking spaces. And what the new facility will allow is just stacking and queuing related to just the canopy itself. Not any parking, not encroaching on any other uses, which is really not only a great efficiency and circulation factor, but it's a great safety factor. Where the folks using that facility, again, member-based only Costco, will then queue up for gas and then depart the property. As opposed to this right now where they're simply commingling. There's no reason why somebody couldn't park there and then walk in, but you're kind of commingling with the stacking and queuing now. And it's just a product of decades demand growing on this, and then this outdated kind of fueling canopy now with the lack of pumps. So we're going from 16 now to a total of 30, but 24 on the short term.
Thank you.
And I do want to reiterate under testimony that we are not asking for any waivers or deviations to this zoning request for the lighting or the landscaping. Okay, we meet or exceed those standards. So the only thing is just the fact that we are on an out parcel that is more than 25 feet away from the primary use, but it will remain as a member-based fuel facility. And that's when you're advertising for an automobile service facility, it kind of looks like it could be more of a tire change place, maybe a gas station that has a service facility, more of a conventional one with a C-store as well. And that's not the case here. So it will only operate as a member-based only Costco fuel facility. So we're excited to be here, but we're, again, available to answer any questions. I know some folks here from the public as well, so.
Thank you. I'm ready for staff whenever you are. Did you want to go ahead and enter into your items into the record at this point?
Yes.
I can accept those.
Will I get these to you, Dirk? Or?
You can,
Okay.
Thank you.
First one is my full PowerPoint.
Okay.
It's on there.
Okay.
This is the deviation list that has kind of accompanied all of the applications today. And then the last two deviations in that list were the red line of the intersection distance and then the fuel facility itself.
Okay.
And this is one of the corrections from the distance separation, which is 72 feet. So we show that on an engineering plan.
Okay, and this replaces what I have in the record?
Yeah, that actually reflects a 72, but there was a scrivener's error. There was a
Okay, so this is
typo
what
in
was
there, so I wanted to make
referenced.
sure that was
Okay.
clear. And that's how we got that number. It was a 72, just to show that.
Okay, so I've got applicant exhibit A is the 48-hour letter that you submitted, just for
Yes.
housekeeping purposes. One will be your PowerPoint. Two will be the deviation list, but this is identical to what I already had in the staff report, is that
Yes,
correct?
that's
Okay, so it's just the deviation list. And three will then be the revised site plan that was also provided in the 48-hour letter. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm ready, thank you, good morning.
For the record, Dirk Damley, Lee County Zoning. I'm a principal planner in the zoning section here. I've previously been accepted as an expert witness in the Lee County Land Development Code and Lee Plan. I'd like to do so again today.
Yes, thank you.
I want to start out by just talking about the 8 versus 16, because you had a question about that. I want to make sure on the record we had the staff's opinion on that. With the iterative process of going through plan development amendments since the early 2000s on this, at some point there was an administrative approval that had a 16 pump consideration. In the most recent governing resolution, it's silent to the number of fuel pumps. And in our code, when it's silent to the number of fuel pumps, it defers back to 8. So even though there is an existing condition there, the way that we're technically needing to request this is from the defaulted 8 up to the 30. And so that's the way the language was crafted for this one today.
Okay, but in actuality, they're going from 16 positions to ultimately 24 in the interim and then maybe 30?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There is technically only one deviation sought for connection separation. I did actually have a updated conditions document that provides that number, that 72 feet
Thank
the
you.
applicant spoke about.
Okay, and then that will be staff exhibit 2. Staff exhibit 1 is the PowerPoint.
Oh, here, I have paper copies of those.
Thank you. I knew it was coming, so thank you very much.
Just to put a little more on the record, this is part of the Gulf Coast Town Center MPD. It's quite a significant plan development. Within Lee County, it is a DRI as well. In terms of where its location is up here in the northeast corner, adjacent to the Costco, or across the street from Gulf Center Drive. The applicant did note that this is really just moving across the street, and I've already put on the record that really what's happened is this was an ancillary use, but with its moving across the street and away from the subject property, it's no longer technically an ancillary use, even though its function will be that way. It is a standalone automotive service station. And just to make the distinction between that and a convenience food and beverage store, which is what we see most of today, is the lack of a retail component associated with it. I can't go buy chips and a soda at this location. I can only buy fuel. And that's really the big distinction between an automotive service station and a convenience food and beverage store.
But that is the correct use classification.
That's our
of
opinion,
what
yes.
Okay.
This is just an overlay to see what the site plan would look like with the new facility on that subject property and how it would interact with the rest of Gulf Coast Town Center. The applicant did say they are moving the access point further south towards the Taco Bell, and then connecting in with their their interconnections on the north side of the Taco Bell property to their southern boundary. I don't have it here, but just to talk about the site plan a little bit, there is an existing 25-foot buffer along the property line here. I believe it's 15 along the north side here. I'm not entirely sure what's the existing condition of the plantings there today, but with the space that was there available and the requirements of 34-1353, it's of staff's opinion that the space is available for them to be able to comply with those requirements at time of development order, and that's why we didn't really jump in and try to provide additional conditioning on the landscaping plan. The applicant did provide additional landscaping here as well, but like I said, we didn't find it necessary to provide additional conditions on that because they would be meeting the intents of 34-1353. And my understanding is that there's also a required landscape buffer along that eastern side. I don't recall if it's a covenant that required that or if it's a condition of the zoning, but there is that buffer planting exists along Ben Hill Griffin today, and they would just need to make sure at the time of development order that it meets the planting requirements of 34-1353. This was originally rezoned back in 2000 with Z00024. The most recent governing resolution is Z2020. That's 20-020 for the record. And there was an administrative approval in 2021 to address some changes with the multifamily tract interior to Gulf Coast Town Center. And moving forward, just want to talk briefly on decision-making criteria. The applicant went through in their request statement and addressed the criteria as required by the Land Development Code for rezonings and for the plan development amendment criteria. And we find that this is a relatively small piece of Gulf Coast Town Center. This isn't a very significant change to the Gulf Coast Town Center overall. It really is a relocation of an existing use, and it's our opinion that what the applicant did put on the record about this being part of an existing members-only club the Costco gas facility, that it wouldn't necessarily change with a significant rate the amount of trips associated with the gas station compared to something like a Wawa or a racetrack if there was to be one constructed there. This is in the university community future land use category, which is has been established to kind of augment Florida Gulf Coast University and provide cohesive development with Florida Gulf Coast University. There's a lot of word spaghetti with Florida Gulf Coast University and Gulf Coast Town Center, but we find that this is just working on a single out parcel and not significantly changing the already functioning Gulf Coast Town Center, and what they're doing does not run afoul of any of the goals and the goal or the objectives and policies of Goal 15. This is kind of an infill property. There's, I believe, only 6 parcels left within Gulf Coast Town Center. And my understanding just from personal interactions is most of those are under activity today in terms of coming in for new development. But this is really an urban area. It is a well-developed area, and we find them consistent with objective 2.1 and 2.2. Just wanted to speak a little bit to policy 5.1.5. There is a neighboring community to the east, the Miramar, and there is approximately 281 feet if you go from property line of the applicant's subject property to the property of the nearest residential lot inside of Miramar. There's already the existing buffer that we talked about that's in place today with some mature vegetation. They will likely have to augment that to ensure compliance with 341353. There's a relatively significant right-of-way between them, and then their community also has landscaping. And even though we aren't necessarily relying on their landscaping on their end, but we do find with the separation, the existing landscaping on our end, that there is a substantial separation and buffer in today that would ensure minimal impacts from the facility. And then there are no adjacent residential uses to the northwest and south. You get a little bit further south and a little bit further west, and then you run into the apartment complex there. I'm not sure if that's open yet, but last time I was down there, it was still under construction. Staff reviewed the case through Goal 6, and those requirements will be reviewed again at time of development order approval. And I did want to talk about that a little bit as well. You asked about this one gas station being in effect at a time. Oftentimes when things are getting replaced on a property, there's an ability for a development order to be stipulated where you get a CC for a property for a gas station, and then there's a stipulation that basically says within 90 days or within 6 months the other facility needs to be demolished. My suspicion is that's how that would play out at time of development order to ensure compliance with the requirements of the zoning resolution. This isn't a mixed-use development area. The planned development is itself a mixed-use planned development. Because this isn't really incorporating a true new use, there wasn't really a lot of changes to the review for Goal 11, but we do find it meets the requirement or the consistency of that goal as well. There is an existing surface water management plan and approved DRP for this property. That may need to be reviewed at time of development order, but they will be required to be consistent with that and tie into the existing infrastructure for Gulf Coast Town Center. And then in terms of Goal 158, and in terms of providing a diversified and stable economy, while this wouldn't necessarily create a new job or jobs with just the relocation of a gas facility, anything that would provide for a refresh of an area does tend to generate a little more sustainable activity on the property. We find that they're consistent with Goal 158. Just wanted to put on the record about the deviation. Deviation 24, that's 72 feet versus I believe it was 93 feet in the staff report. We don't find that to be a significant change, and we're still recommending approval of that deviation. And with that, we're here with any questions you may have. We are recommending approval.
I think I asked my questions fully as we went through, but we will come back after rebuttal, I'm sure, and address anything else we need to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we will open the public comment period. So the first card I have is for Neil Montgomery. Good morning.
Good morning. Neil Montgomery for the record, Pavis Law Firm, and Mr. Morrow, our expert witnesses here with us. Just by way of background, I am familiar with both of these projects. I did the DRI for Gulf Coast Town Center, and I did the DRI for Miramar, and I've done most of the amendment to Gulf Coast Town Center. So with that, I would point out that, well, Brad did not ask for a deviation from lighting. There is an existing deviation that allows 30-foot poles. And obviously Miramar is an existing residential community. And I do want to point something out. Having worked on most of the projects within the university community, there is a requirement in the LEED plan that they're supposed to have it reviewed and commented on by the university. Originally, the language said by the Board of Regents, but over time they got rid of the Board of Regents. So originally it was Charlie Reed, and then it was Joe Shepard, and then it was Steve McGarrah, and now it's Kitty Green. So we have gone to meet with them in every change for the ones we've done. I don't know that I saw it in the record that they did that, and that is a requirement of the LEED plan. I would note, for the record, policy 5.1.5, I know you're very familiar with it, and it does submit that conditions can be imposed, particularly in regard to buffering, to protect existing proposed communities. Obviously, this is an existing residential community. Anecdotally, I would submit that, and ironically, I've worked on several racetrack gas stations. So Racetrack did a gas station on the north side of Bonita Beach Road. So there's Bonita Beach Road, a wall, a golf hole, and then Worthington. Even though that gas station met the lighting standards and they were not allowed to be a 30-foot, they did experience glare and problems in Worthington, such that the city council person from that area made Racetrack go out and he went with them to do the light readings. So it can meet the lighting requirements and standards, but still have an impact from glare. Policy 6.1.3 indicates that commercials should provide harmony and screening and avoid negative impacts on surrounding land use. Obviously, in this case, the concern is glare. And 6.1.4 says commercial development will be approved only when compatible with adjacent existing and proposed uses. Dirk did mention policy 6.1.6. I don't think that's relevant because it says the county's going to maintain regulations. And the county does maintain regulations and does enforce them, but it is not at all uncommon in a plan development when it's needed to enhance that buffering. And I would submit that section 34-411, which wasn't addressed by the applicant in their testimony today, provides that development and subsequent use of the planned development shall not create or increase impacts on property and off-site, and it should not impose a nuisance on surrounding land uses or the public's interest generally, and it has a lot of things, but in there is glare. So obviously that's the concern here, and that every effort should be made to address that. It also submits that site planning and design shall minimize any negative impacts of the development on the surrounding land use pattern. I would say this, I'm a member of Costco, so hopefully I don't lose my membership. I have visited that site, obviously, because I try to frequent projects I work on, and I obviously use the one in Fort Myers and the one in Brandon when I'm at a horse show, so I'm very familiar with all of those. And I want to go back to the discussion on the same premises. Also worked on the Bell Tower DRI, and that was a big question when they put the theater in. But in that case, the owner owns all of the property, including the road, but there's a big, huge crosswalk that you might notice between the main center parking lot and the theater, and that to allow people to safely cross that road. In my visit to all three of those Costcos, it's not at all unusual to have the person who's getting gas wait, and somebody gets out of the car and goes to do the shopping so they can save time. And while I appreciate that, and I think it's a great idea, without some recognition of employees and potential patrons trying to duplicate that effort here, it can create a problem. That's not Miramar's concern. I just would note that for the record. So what we have here is they're right, it's a very busy gas station, and in season, it's crazy. So you're gonna move it closer to the residential, and you can almost double it. So that does create an impact for the folks across the street. I would also note that Section 34-624 performance standards also says that we shouldn't cause light pollution or glare on residential properties. So that's a concern. And to address that concern, Mr. Morrow is going to recommend landscaping. And just so you know, we didn't hide the ball or anything. We have communicated with Dirk throughout the process and provided information. And he has told me that he shared that information with you folks so that you have known all along what the concerns were. So I want you to know that we're not here to be sneaky. We're here to kind of point out that there's a problem. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The other card I had was for Mr. Morrow.
Great. Would you like a copy of this?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, I have.
So these are proposed conditions, and I will accept that as Morrow Exhibit 1.
Share, I'll give you this one. This is on.
For the record, Keith Morrow, Morrow Design. I am a consultant to Miramar. And as Neil said, I think probably a lot of the residents that live next door, including myself as another Costco member, are going to be very happy about this facility. I think our chief concern is that issue of potential light trespass that may come across the street, though it is 280 feet, as Dirk said, to the closest unit. We'd just like some additional sort of commitment to be able to assure our residents that that won't be an issue for them moving forward. So what you see in the literature that I have given you are some sort of draft conditions that we thought perhaps would alleviate that problem. For instance, instead of the traditional 12 or 14 foot tall trees that might be required through the LDC code along Ben Hill Griffith, we're recommending just a slight bump up, perhaps to 16 to 18 feet, to be able to help that to the degree that that might, as an item 5, be able to have a little bit of berming. If it's only, I believe, 25 feet wide along that side, by the time you go up a 3-to-1 slope, little flat section and return back down, we only get a couple feet, but every little bit helps in this condition. We are directly opposite of the north entrance to Miramar Lakes, which unfortunately is a very nice but a very open palm tree lined area where that light's going to continue to transmit itself in an easterly direction, as opposed to it being further north or further south where there is some screening vegetation already in place. Additionally, I think if we could bump up the size of some of that shrub material when we get to the top of the berm, instead of the traditional 30-inch, 36-inch material, would probably help. And to the degree we could minimize in that particular location where we're directly across and light trespass is the issue. If we could not have pines, palms, or flowering trees because those tend to either defoliate during the winter months or allow the light to continue to travel. And again, I think that's primarily it. With respect to lighting, we did discuss, you know, there are some tricks, but I think in terms of being a good neighbor, all we'd really like to see is some assurance that we might be using cutoff fixtures out there rather than having the light be able to go. And I'm sure staff's going to look at this as well, but whether that needs to be conditioned or that's a code element in there, all we're concerned about is that that light moves down toward the ground. And I think, as Neil said, that glare is there. We're going to use the vegetation to try and knock that back. But to the degree that we could ensure that, at least for any light fixtures that are used out there, that we do have cutoff fixtures so that there's no trespass. Pardon me?
Can you address availability?
Yes, there was a question about availability of 16 to 18 foot trees. Primarily, we're looking at canopy trees. It would be oaks or mahoganies or a like tree. I just pulled up this morning Cherry Lake Nursery. We get them pretty regularly there. They have 200-gallon material that's of that size and caliber. Certainly, we're not asking them to go out and do the more expensive, larger ranch oaks that you can also get, but these are still commercially produced. And though availability is an issue after Ian for us, they're still out in the marketplace.
And I just assumed that these are written broadly, but you're specifically talking about the eastern buffer.
The Ben Hill Griffith side, eastern, you are correct.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that for the
Yes.
record. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Did the applicant have any questions that you wanted to ask? Okay, thank you. Okay. That's everyone I see from the public, so we can close public comment. Do you need a moment before we come back for rebuttal?
Nope.
Okay, go ahead. If you'd like to speak again, thank you.
There are some, this is Brad Wester, driver McAfee. There are some items that I did not print out as an exhibit, but I can certainly maybe have staff print them out to provide them on the record that I'm going to read right now.
Slowly.
I guess I'll start with Ms. Montgomery's, and she's very knowledgeable of the town center, having worked on that property and working through the entitlements for many years. We are very aware of the Board of Governors requirement, and we did that in December. And I'll read this into the record. I think I may have provided it previously for the file, but this was more of a title matter, not necessarily a zoning matter. However, the Florida Gulf Coast University does look at it from a compatibility standpoint in terms of a prohibited use list. And so I sent the letter to the Board of Governors, previously Board of Regents, and received a return letter from the Vice President and General Counsel of the Florida Gulf Coast University. And in summation, it basically talks about the declaration of restrictions in the title, and basically reports that the proposed gas facility is not on the list of prohibited uses and activities in the buffer area, because Florida Gulf Coast has a buffer area that they want to see about compatibility. And this is directly related to compatibility and does include things like lighting. And to the extent that the declaration at issue has any applicability to the Florida Gulf Coast University, this letter confirms that the university does not have any objections to the rezoning of the property, which is within the buffer area for the, quote, the relocation and expansion of the existing outdated Costco wholesale gas facility, end quote. And that's a letter dated December 21st of 2023, just basically confirming on our end the buffer area within the Florida Gulf Coast University and getting sign off from the university itself for this use specifically. On this parcel, they were sent site plans and the full documentation. And I'll provide that on the record as needed. I'm going to Oh, I can't do that, that's yours. That's okay, you know what, it's okay, Dirk, leave it there. I'm gonna use this site plan that you have up already. So the site, as you know, is adorned by a 25-foot buffer around the property, specifically in areas like Ben Hill Griffin. And so we're supplementing that landscaping. It was found sufficient by staff. And only yesterday at 10:03 a.m. did I receive any first correspondence regarding any concern or opposition on this and the suggested landscaping supplement list. Yesterday at 10:03 a.m. by email from Mr. Danley was the first time I received anything through this entire eight-month process. I do want to make it a point for the glare. We do have a photo metric plan, and I can include this sheet on the record because we do a lot of extensive preliminary engineering on this. We don't just do the zoning and entitlements just initially. We spend a lot of money on the engineering, running a parallel course at risk. And so our photometric plan at the property edge, and this will be included on the record, has a, let's just call it a light bleed to the property edge of 0.0 foot candle, 0.1, and 0.2, and that is the maximum. So the maximum is 0.2 foot candle at the property edge along Ben Hill Griffin. We saw the dimensions on here for the property, from property edge to property edge, basically from our commercial property to the nearest residential property. And it was already entered into the record of a distance. Property appraiser, rough estimates, I have it around 292 feet. But more importantly, not just property edge, because there are setbacks we're dealing with, both from the residential side and the commercial side. So the reality of it is where's the lighting coming from? Cars, ambient lighting from the poles on the property, and then the canopy itself. The canopy itself is roughly 480 feet from the nearest residential property line, 480 feet, and that includes the entire parking lot of the commercial property, all of Ben Hill Griffin right-of-way, the master plan property, and then touching the nearest residential piece, so about 480 feet. Our lighting is tied to the hours of operation of the existing Costco wholesale store, and I think a lot of folks know that. They probably wish the gas station was open later, but it is not. So in all reality, let's just call it roughly half of the year during daylight savings time. What's, Mr. Alvarado, can you testify when the hours of operation are?
Normally it's 1 hour after the warehouse. So if the warehouse closed, I think it's at 8:30. 8:30 during the week, and at 9:30 we'll be closing the warehouse.
So during the summer, the sun sets between 8:45 and 9 o'clock roughly, or gets dark. So it's really only 30 minutes after that when the gas station will close, and then the lights will be turned off. From there, it's just ambient security lighting around the property, and as you see, when all the lights are on, it doesn't exceed a 0.2 foot candle at the property edge. In some places, it's 0.0 and 0.1. So these are all screened and downcast lighting that aren't intended to provide glare. They have a very photometric realm to it that provide just the need on the property itself and not light bleed. I will say one very important point. The current Costco's facility, the cars and all of the headlights are oriented towards the residents, okay, towards the residential master plan community. It is exactly the opposite for the proposal on this property. The canopy and the cars that queue up into the canopy all face to the west. So all of the car lights, the lights are all facing to the west when they queue up, okay? I can't say the same if this site were to be developed as anything other than a Costco. You might have parking along the property edge here that has lighting that folks parking there and so forth. So I think that's a betterment plan when you talk about the staging of the cars and the orientation of the headlights themselves. So we're going exactly the opposite way.
You will still get lights because your entrance is going to be facing them as you come that way. So was there any consideration, if there was a concern to address it, to maybe centralize increased buffering just in that location? The width of whatever the entrance might be?
My guys are looking at the landscape plan now.
I see what you're saying, but I mean, it is,
You wanna
they're
get up
all
top?
queuing in that
Okay.
same direction.
Okay. So we haven't had, since receiving this yesterday morning, we have not had a chance to see how we could integrate any additional buffering on the property, including the plant species list that was provided to us.
So there's 3 additional trees here.
So on the landscape plan, we do supplement it with additional trees, in
Yeah,
that,
they're only slash pine zone,
slash pine trees.
so that's not really doing much.
Yeah. So we've got some landscaping in that kind of main entry circulation road before they queue up into the gas canopy. But we will, we're adhering to the code, and you can see the code will enter that in the record. It's 0.2 foot candle at the property edge with the existing landscaping, the existing lighting that's proposed. The other thing is folks potentially getting out of their car and running across the street to do grocery shopping while the cars are staged to, that's not gonna happen. We have a full-time attendant that works on the property, and that will remain on this new proposal site. And so essentially, they watch over the entire facility. They're not gonna allow folks to come and walk on and off the property. You're supposed to remain in your car and then get gas and then depart the property. So that's just a kind of an indicator, more of a detailed indicator of some of the lighting aspects on the property with the photometric plan, the stacking and queuing of the automobiles, the additional buffering. Again, on the record, we have not had time to look at the landscape list and to see how to incorporate any of it. But I think from folks testifying that they are already members of Costco, I'm sure they can understand that Costco wants to be a good neighbor. Always does, always wants to do the right thing. So whatever we can do, we will work with staff on this in terms of landscaping. It's fairly easy to swap out some landscaping material. So I'm not here to rebut them wholeheartedly and say, no, we're digging our feet into the ground and not doing a thing. But we just haven't had time to look at that. So, and what we don't want to do is hold up this approval. So if there's a condition we can apply to this to say, staff in the engineering and planning, we will all work with staff on the placement of certain trees to reduce that nuisance of, let's say, automobiles pulling on the property. For instance, we have slash pine. We could probably put something else there. And we'll look at the landscape list that was provided by Ms. Montgomery and her client. So we're here to extend and say we want to be good neighbors. We're going to do that. We just haven't had time. I've had it less than 24 hours. But I think our photometric plan really serves notice that we meet or exceed the code. And because, again, at the property line, and it is on here, there are 6 areas on the photometric plan that is 0.0 light bleed at the property edge. It's pretty significant.
And just to click, because I know you keep saying that you comply with the code, but there was a mention of the deviation that it, I guess, elevates it. So when you say that, are you looking at that deviation, or are you applying it to the actual LDC?
That's a great question. And I appreciate Ms. Montgomery saying that. No, we're not asking for a waiver from that deviation or exacerbating that current deviation for lighting on the property.
But are you meeting that deviation?
We
or
are.
meeting the code? Okay,
Yes.
so you are taking advantage of the deviation, just as other developments are within, you have
Yes.
the right to do that.
Yes.
I want to be clear about when you're saying that you're complying. I want to be clear about which regulation you're complying with, if it's the LDC or if it's the deviation.
So right now, it's the LDC, but I would actually like a little bit more advisory on that deviation because we're not asking to utilize, it doesn't mean we have to adhere to that deviation.
Correct.
That's an option in the due process on that list to utilize.
That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when you're saying that, which height you're looking at for the lighting.
Yeah.
And staff may be able to,
Yeah. And I think some of our poles, we've got, are obviously because we have a photometric plan. Some of those poles obviously are listed on this, or all the poles are listed on this, including the canopy. So the lighting we have on here, and we've got a full detailed plan, but we've got an existing height of 32 feet on some of the poles. And so we can certainly reduce that.
okay.
Yeah. And what we might be able to reduce it is that pole is not any higher than any of the trees on the property. I mean, there's a lot of very mature palm trees around the property. I know the concerned resident and Ms. Montgomery they said they don't want palm trees, but there's a lot of existing palm trees and we don't want to remove those. So what we can proffer on is working with staff on the landscaping and sidebar, working with Ms. Montgomery and others on the landscaping and where to place. That's a pretty easy thing to do. and then the lighting, that none of the lighting goes higher than any of the existing trees on the property. And it's all gonna still stay downcast. Now, what that does, on the record, is actually even make the photometric plan, it reduces it at the foot candle potentially. I can't guarantee it because we need to rework that, but I'm sure it reduces that foot candle on the property edge. So again, we use very modern, very contemporary, screened and downcast lighting, so I don't think glare is an issue. I talked about the cars in the queue with their lighting right now. Right now it's facing out to Ben Hill Griffin, it's now turning the opposite way. We'll work with staff on landscaping. We'll work with staff on the reducing the height of those poles, and there aren't a lot of those poles on the property. What's that?
They're just 5, and
There's- yeah.
everything is pointed inside.
And that, yeah, so that's John Alvarado,
Sorry.
and there's 5 poles on the property, and they all kind of promote inside, but we can reduce the height on that. So we want to be good neighbors, but again, with all due respect, I just got that yesterday morning, less than 24 hours, so it's kind of hard for us to react immediately on that. And I know some of that has to do with, obviously, Ms. Montgomery knows what's going on as far as zoning, but, you know, the legal notices and the signage went out, so we understand that there's a lag time on when people see what's coming there, because we're working with staff for the last 8 months on the sufficiency of it all. So hopefully that moves the needle with the concerned residents and Ms. Montgomery. But we don't want to hold up the approval today to kind of resupply a full new landscape plan. We'd like to at least commit to that and then move forward with an approval.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Staff ready for their rebuttal?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning.
For the record, good morning. For the record, my name is Beth Workman. I am a principal planner in the zoning section, and just to introduce myself a little bit to the Costco folks, I have a degree in botany. When we say that we're going to be working through a condition you'll be working with me. I have had time to look at Ms. Montgomery, the proposed condition, and I wanted to speak to buffering and land development code. In chapter 10, 414, the very beginning of the landscape code, it talks about what the goal is of that chapter. And the goal of buffering is to screen and shield for headlight shine and for compatibility with different uses. So coming out of the gate on any case, whether it be a gas station, whether it be a retail, a doctor's office, whatever, we're looking at headlight shine for right-of-way buffers. That's why the shrubs in the code are at 24 inches out of the gate. In chapter 34, there's a supplementary section for gas stations, which increases the height of the tree material, puts undulating berms, that kind of thing, because of the intensity of the site. So talking about Gulf Coast Town Center, when it went through the rezoning process, there were conditions put on Ben Hill Griffith, but it had to do with the fast food, which also has a supplementary section to it. And so what I have is a little excerpt from the approved zoning that shows a typical buffer on Ben Hill, and it's undulating, and it shows the tree material being at 12 to 14 feet, and the shrub material undulating throughout that, and it ranges from 24 to 36 inches. So I have that for the record, just so you can see what currently is out there, because one of the things that's concerning from a staff level is one of the items that was brought up in this proposed condition is to provide a berm. Well, if we go in and construct a berm along Ben Hill, you're impacting the existing tree material that's been in there for over 8 to 10 years, which is pretty well established tree material. So that's a concern that staff has when we go in to build the berm, to plant on top of the berm. So I'm going to approach and give you a copy of this.
Thank you. So that'll be staff exhibit 4. And this is taken from the 2000 zoning?
Yeah. Here we go. I know you're familiar, but so that's one concern about if we work on a condition and we condition that a 3-to-1, a berm that 3-to-1 slope goes in here, what does that look like? Because we have existing pines in here, and anytime you impact pine roots, they die. with weight or anything. So going in, we don't want to damage what's there, but we want to supplement accordingly because there's already irrigation in there. So anything we supplement with, we need to tread lightly. The 16 to 18 foot tall trees, these are 30-foot light poles. They regardless of the height of the light poles, it has to meet the land development code for lighting at the property line. And what Mr. Wester is saying is at 0.0, looking at 30-foot light poles. So they're meeting land development code. So that's out the door for environmental. So then we look at headlight shine. So now we're looking at shrub material because trees really don't do anything for headlight shine. So one of the things in this proposed condition is a 5-foot tall dense shrub. You cannot find 5-foot tall shrubs in the market today because of the hurricane. It doesn't exist. So we can put this condition in, but at time of development order, they're not going to be able to find any unless they start contract growing like months ago. So looking at this, we need to look at what we have currently from zoning, which is this undulation, and how can we supplement it? Maybe we supplement it with bigger shrubs going in. Maybe we supplement it with different height trees to form canopies. So we need to look at that, and we can look at that with the applicant, no problem. But these are the things that I don't think palms need to be out of the scope of it because you can cluster palms to form one canopy. For instance, our parking code says if you're going to use parking canopy trees and use palms, you have to cluster 3 to equal 1 canopy tree. So we can look at diversifying that. But really we need to look at the headlight shine if that's the case, coming from that entry point and the view shed going into the street. Because up and down Ben Hill, you have this. And it's fast food restaurants. That's why when they came in with the changes on Ben Hill for the buffering, it's because these fast food restaurants are open late. And you do have that headlight shine, you do have the drive-through. And so that's why it intensified that type D. It was 15 foot going to 20 foot on that cross section. So, and they supplemented the plantings. One of the good things about Gulf Coast Town Center is they can plant in the easements. There's conditions to allow planting in the easements because each one of these properties has that. So that works in our favor too when we're coming up with a condition. So I would like to kind of look at this and sort of, massage it a little bit so that we can use what's out there because we don't want to damage what we have and then supplement that. And it sounds like the applicant's willing to do something like that. So I just wanted to put that on the record with what we had.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Just to clarify again, the photometric plan that they were speaking about, that does meet the lighting standard and the code of measurement at the property line? That's where those...
From what I'm understanding is the evaluation for the photometric at 0.0 is evaluating a 30 to 32 foot pole.
And the maximum is 0.2. So it's 0.0, 0.1, and 0.2 along that frontage of the Ben Hill.
And it's 0.0, you're testing?
0.0 on the outer edges, and then it goes to 0.2 like right in the middle. And yeah, and that's with the 30-foot poles.
Because if the public came in and said that they were concerned about the glow from these 30-foot poles, the trees and the shrubs aren't going to do anything for that. So from a staff perspective, we would be looking at it like we shield a preserve with the apparatus that could go on the fixture to put a shield on the one side to keep it from shining. And that's what we do sometimes when we're adjacent to preserves for environmental. So that's, if that was the problem. But what I'm hearing kind of is possibly it's just that entry point and from the cars.
Right, which is 280 feet. Do you typically condition when they're 280 to 400?
Not typically, because we have a roadway in between. So, we're already putting a increased buffer. And when this buffer went in on Ben Hill, it was prior to the fast food supplementary code in Chapter 34 going into play. I think it was at the cusp. So we didn't really have the teeth to put it in there at 25. So they supplemented with an enhanced type D through the condition and through the typical that I put in the record. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Dirk, did you have anything further?
Yeah, I just wanted to put on the record, we've talked about the lighting, I just want to put on the record, 34625 does provide those lighting standards. It does allow for a 6-foot initial foot candle for canopies. and fuel pumps, but at the property line needs to be 0.5, and then I believe there's a 0.5 foot candles, and then at 10 feet from the property line, it can be no more than 0.2 foot candles. So they are already exceeding those standards, and I don't recall if the lighting plan was provided in part of the application, but if you would like to see that, we can leave the record open to provide that.
And just from staff's testimony, they testified that they did meet the lead plan requirement for review. Was that provided in
We
the
do have that letter. We can provide that to you. We can leave the record open even for a day and let you have that as well.
Well, I think I'd like to leave the record open, so I don't, it sounds like you just went through this process in a different jurisdiction. Here, we have the opportunity to leave the record open for written submission, so there isn't another hearing, but what it allows the opportunity for is I will set forth specific things that you are to discuss after hearing that happens outside the scope of this hearing, and then you provide it to me in writing, and then I consider that when I'm making my recommendation to the board, and I either adopt it or I don't, and I usually address why or why not in the recommendation. So how much time does the applicant and staff want to do that? Because I hear you saying you just got this information and staff seems to also have some concern, so.
Maybe a maximum of 2 weeks, maybe a week, right? We could turn that, I mean, Brad, this is Brad Wester driving McAfee. I would imagine we would need 2 weeks to kind of pull a new plan set together that shows what we talked about today, because the importance of it isn't necessarily the importance is to protect from cars pulling on the property, so we'll stop that light from the entrance road. I do want to address, though, since we exceed, in many cases, the foot candle at the property edge, the trade-off is if you reduce and I appreciate you bringing up the code from the lighting, we have to meet the code for circulation. We've seen this before in other facilities where they don't want the height of the actual pole, the light pole. So what we have to do is bring it down. What that does is inherently add more poles. So you get a pole forest across the parking lot because it then shrinks the actual kind of circumference of that photometric kind of broadcast of the light. And so the trade-off is we only have 5 that's listed, 5 tall poles on there. The big mature landscaping along the perimeter is meant to mask that from any point source view. But more importantly, they meet today's modern contemporary standards for light bleed, and we prove that in our photometric plans, which we'll provide here as an exhibit, based on the current conditions that we applied. We didn't need to provide the photometrics plan to date, but we will provide it now. But again, I do want to reiterate the Board of Governors and through the Florida Gulf Coast University has found this compatible. Did they look at photometrics? No, but they looked at what the use is, and they gave us the letter, and they have no objection to the type of use. So I think that's really good. But with all that said, we would need 2 weeks to resupply a plan, and we're willing to work with staff. We don't want to add a berm because it does start choking out the root systems and the established vegetation on the perimeter. But we will do our best to provide an offset for any of the lighting that's pulled onto the property from cars and things like that.
Thank you for that. So we're running into the holiday in 2 weeks because 2 weeks from today is July 4th, so I don't want to lock anybody into that. I'm going to set a date of leaving the record open until July 8th. You can submit it before that. That's just the outside date that it needs to be submitted by end of business on July 8th. And again, the way that process usually works is you just work with staff, and it sounds like the property neighbors would like to have a conversation as well, maybe, or you've got their written comments. You provide something in writing to me. If you don't agree, just indicate that staff wants this, applicant wants that, and then I'll take that under review before it goes to the board, and then the board will make the final decision.
Okay.
And anybody that spoke here today does have the opportunity to speak at the board as well, so I'm sure you can update them at that time of what subsequent conversations occurred.
Okay.
So with that, we will conclude for today. I would like then for the record to be open at that time before July 8th, then the revised conditions that you might come up with, the letter from FGCU, just so I have that for the record to tie up that loose end, and the photometric plan. We don't typically look at that at zoning, but because that's been the central issue of discussion today, I should have that in the record as well. So those 3 items, and you'll get an order that says